Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance, joined by Eric Bauman, chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. I'd like to speak with you, sir, about, the election. And let's reflect back, if we may, about the convention, the Democratic National Convention. I ask you and look back because a lot of rumblings that to the extent there were disruptions during the convention as a result of Bernie Sanders supporters, those disruptions were coming from the California delegation. Is that accurate? You were on the floor. Is that accurate?
Can I tell you, this was probably the most exciting convention I've ever been to.
Okay.
It was the best produced convention I've ever been to. Michelle Obama's speech brought tears to my eyes. When President Obama got done speaking and Hillary came out on the stage, one could not help but be filled with emotion and realize the passing of the torch from one great moment in history to the next.
And if I may say, it is interesting that Mrs. Obama and Mr. Clinton gave such impassioned speeches, especially Mrs. Clinton, because I remember that relations were rocky between Mrs. Clinton and Mrs. Obama. Obviously, Mr. Obama and Mrs. Clinton patched it up quite well when she was Secretary of State, but Mrs. Obama's speech was just, it was unflinching.
You know what? I must tell you, I was live on the radio at two incredibly emotional moments. One was when she said, "I wake up every day in a house built by slaves." Oh,
Yeah, that was a moment.
what a moment.
Yeah.
And then, at that very moment when Hillary Clinton walked out on the stage, when President Obama was on the stage, I was doing a live radio piece with Jim Brulte, the chair of the Republican Party.
Your friend, by the way.
My friend.
Right.
And what he said to me as I became very emotional,
Right.
in fact, the radio host said, "I can just see you have goosebumps." I said, "You have no idea, the hair's standing up on the back of my neck."
Right.
But Brulte said, "You realize you have a front row seat to history." And it's true. As to the issue of the disruptions, look, the Bernie Sanders fans were extraordinarily enthusiastic, and California and Wisconsin was where there was the greatest amount of activity from them.
So Wisconsin being the other state.
Wisconsin being the other state. And what was amazing, and I think was probably very startling for Senator Sanders in particular, the last night when Hillary spoke, and she singled out Senator Sanders and talked about how they would work together on the school tuition funding, and the camera was on him and you could see him, and they booed him.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I sat there in my seat thinking, this is the moment when for sure he realized this was never really about him.
That being said, do you feel as if the Democratic Party is coalescing around Mrs. Clinton?
I would say by and large the answer is yes.
The polls suggest such.
So there was a portion of the Bernie Sanders supporters who never really were Democrats, and those are folks. They were Bernie or bust. They were whatever. Now many of them are now with Jill Stein, although it hasn't bumped her in the polls at all. She's still at 2%, no more.
And she's the Green Party nominee.
She's the Green Party candidate. But overall, I would say, it seems to me as I go around the state speaking to different groups, that it has coalesced. I just had a unity event at my home, a barbecue, and we had about 150 people there, and it was very well divided between Clinton supporters and Sanders supporters, and I must tell you, it was enthusiastic. Everybody got along. And I have to say, I was proud to see the party activists coalescing again.
I want to talk about your travels around the state because as we speak today, Mrs. Clinton is up by about 35 points in California. Now, I don't think anyone expected California.
Donald says he's going to win.
Right,
California.
but I think it's fair to say that California is likely to follow in the blue column. But that margin is massive. I mean, Mr. Obama won California by mid-20s, I think. Are you concerned with the numbers being so strong that actually could hurt the down-ballot races because people won't feel like they need to vote, or the reverse? Do you think it really helps the down-ballot races because she's so far ahead?
So there's a conventional wisdom problem that always happens for us in the Democratic Party in California. And the more people say, well, gee, it's a shoo-in to win, there's always the risk of people not turning out. On the other hand, there's also a bandwagon effect. People want to be part of it. Here's what I'm finding with the volunteers. Instead of having fewer volunteers wanting to work on the Hillary campaign, There are more volunteers who want to
Really?
work. And the campaign's efforts are greatly focused on helping our brothers and sisters in Nevada.
What about your brothers and sisters running for state assembly,
Okay.
state senate,
Which-
Congress in California?
Which is the reason why we've built a network, grassroots network around the state. Campaign offices are beginning to open all over that will focus on helping us regain our supermajorities in the Assembly and the Senate,
That'd be a tall order.
and increasing our hold on the congressional delegation. I would say the Assembly could be done and some.
Meaning
There
supermajority.
are seats in play that are really in play, and we may get that nobody's even thinking of.
That's what I wonder, is there are certain seats which are target battleground seats.
For sure.
Are there seats out there that we had no idea were in play and all of a sudden flip?
There are a couple that 6 months ago we wouldn't be talking about, but we're talking about now.
Will you talk about them?
Well, I will tell you, at the top of my list is the 40th Assembly District in San Bernardino,
Mark Steinnorth is the incumbent.
the 60th Assembly District in Riverside.
That is Eric Linder.
Eric
These are
Linder.
Republicans.
The 38th Assembly District in Santa Clarita.
That is
Well, it's somebody who's not running for re-election because
Right.
they're running for the Senate
exactly the Scott Wilkes seat.
seat. Scott Wilkes. And the 35th Assembly District out in San Luis Obispo, which is
That-
a
right.
Chajian seat.
Asajian sheet, yes.
We
Don
have
Ortiz-Legg.
an extraordinary candidate there, and of course, on top of that, we're fighting to take back the 65th, which is Sharon Quirk Silva,
Right, Young Kim.
the 66th with Al Miratsuchi, and the
That's David Hadley.
and the 16th Assembly District, which is currently held by Catherine Baker, and we have
She voted in favor of SB 32.
and we have Cocalio as our candidate, a lifelong teacher who's an extraordinary candidate. So there are plenty of opportunities, and by the way, we are making the fight for those. There are a couple of Senate seats that we're fighting for, and there are congressional seats that we're seriously contesting. The Caforio, for Brian Caforio in, which is currently the Steve Knight seat,
Right.
and Jeff Denham's seat, and David Valadeo's seat.
That would be remarkable. Those two seats would be quite a coup if you could pull that off.
And by the way, Darrell Issa has got a
Diego.
serious challenge.
Let me ask you, sir, about Donald Trump, if I may. Recently, I think it was Time Magazine, one of the main weeklies, had a cover that said, picture of Donald Trump melting, and it said meltdown. Do you think he's in meltdown? And honestly, do you think he's in meltdown?
I think he's melted down.
Oh, you think it's past?
No, I think it's there and it continues. It's amazing, he hires a new team, they get him under control for 2 days. He's not going to do personal attacks, and the next 2 days later he starts the personal attacks. He just seemed unhinged, as he called Mrs. Clinton a bigot. This is a guy who has fomented racial and ethnic strife. He spent half the week talking about how he was softening his stance on immigration, and then he said, absolutely there'll be no citizenship, and they'll all have to leave the country in order to be able to stay. I mean, the man has lost his mind.
So where do you go with that type of electoral scenario? Because if there's a view that Mrs. Clinton is likely to win in a landslide, that can cause ramifications throughout California.
I will tell you what, today, everybody posits by 60% or better that the United States Senate turns blue.
Right.
There are more seats in play in the House than we ever imagined possible. I'm not such an optimist that I see it coming back to the Democrats, but I certainly see the Republican margin being dramatically reduced.
His name is Eric Bauman. He is the chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. My name is Brad Pomerance, and you're watching Charter Local Edition.